So hi, this is kind of a contemplation video. Contemplation in the classical sense, which means I'm just, for me, the way that I was taught the term of contemplation was by Richard Rudd, one of my beloved teachers. It was in the way of contemplation is thinking out loud or concentrated thinking while remaining very present and also in contact with our embodied inner world. It's like kind of he says it's a knack, and I relate to that saying, that observation, that it's something that it's hard to explain, but it's kind of embodied thinking, I would say. So I'm going to do that around a few things that I feel a need to synthesize. I tend in certain times in my life to take in a lot of teachings and thoughts from other teachers and wisdom from sources. And this is this kind of period in my life that I'm doing that. And also, I'm a kind of I'm kind of an experimenter in my orientation as a person. I experiment a lot. I go into kind of mini experiments or major experiments with myself, trying out different practices, usually ways of being, ways of practicing, ways of doing things. And most of what the way that my process and path are orienting themselves and are led through my life is actually more through my practice and less through my perception. For me, perception follows practice in a major way, to a large extent. And I first get like an inclination or an inner intuition about what's the right practice for me at this time. It's a kind of attraction I feel to a practice, and a kind of yes that I feel in my being to that engagement with a practice. And then insight and understanding deepen through that engagement, and I find myself like being able to engage more deeply with certain teachings and ways of thinking. And this has always been, I didn't always understand it the way that I do today and accept it. It was quite a struggle to come to terms with it, and today it's just a natural way of being for me. So something's tugging at me. Just excuse me for one moment. So that being said, I want to contemplate today, there's a lot of threads opening up for me in my life, a lot of deepening into ways of thinking, as I said, and also practices that were opened up for me. And I'm trying to discern. I seem to, my mind and also my body actually are trying to discern what's the gist of it, what is most important, and what are the important ways of synthesis that are meaningful for me, and what is less useful. And I have to touch into my actual body to start talking about it. So give me a moment. Oh yeah. The thing is, I'm going to try to explain this because I have it inside me, but I'm trying to like get it out. And everything I say here is about me. So I'm not going to do this like when I like sometimes I say when you, but I mean myself. Like it's all about pertaining to me. So when you engage with like spiritual teachers, and especially people who are very very good thinkers, that are brilliant and have ordered thinking. Many of them in the spiritual arena, they create modalities, and those modalities are supposed to give us kind of leaning point to lean against when we think about like our own being, our own system. And for me, it's useful to lean against modalities, like for instance, like spiral dynamics and the Enneagram, all kinds of typing systems, ways of levels of consciousness systems, like, for instance, the scale of levels of consciousness that Dr. Hawkins created. Those kinds of things, they're helpful to like feel I can get around my experience, because especially for me, I have quite an active emotional system. And also I want to mention human design and also Jinkies, which were major leaning points for me earlier in my life. So my experience is often pretty chaotic. I can feel very chaotic and can be very overwhelmed with feelings. I have a really active mind, so I can also have a lot of thoughts. And so those systems are really brilliant teachers that create them. Are useful for me in two ways. One, they give my mind something to focus on, which my mind has this tendency to focus on systems anyway. So I'm attracted to it, but then they tend to give me a way to find my way around my own experience and start to know and where to look. So it's a leaning point. What do I mean specifically by a leaning point? I mean that, and this is actually the point of everything I'm going to say now. For me, that for me, inner development is a story of developing awareness, presence, and consciousness. And it's a story about like kind of process of integration and purification of my system so that it can let go of all kinds of patterns that take me away from this moment. Why? Because actually this moment is what they call God or source, like this moment, awareness, consciousness is where it's all at. It's the portal to transformation, to changing basically patterns of the human being. And it's also a portal to transforming your perception. And the more that we can let go of distractions, actually, the ways that we're pulled out of this moment, we're pulled out of awareness to what is. The more we let go of those patterns, the more we get access to the good stuff. The good stuff, which is changing, which is having access to more peace in our system, to transforming and integrating, to healing trauma patterns, also is access through awareness in the now. The more you can bring your whole being, and it's not easy, it's not simple for most of us, the more you can bring yourself to be more like mindful or now oriented, the more you can relax, the more you can be present for and to your shadow parts. So for me, it's been all about presence, and I want to interject and say it's not in vain, because if you look at my human design chart, you can see the really, really strong anchor I have there in integration system, which is about just about presence and even being enlightened, but in the sense of just being very present and even being a voice. I think it's the 1020 channel from the G center to the throat. It is just about like voicing the fact that I am present. So, and being a voice and being like a model for that. So this is actually, my body is just defined that way in human design. And it's interesting because it's very natural for me to find myself, and I'm really, really smiling now because it's really funny. I didn't think about it until this moment. And I do have an affinity to systems, and I spent at least like 7 intense years being interested in human design until I had to let it go. And I'm sorry if there's a lot of background noise. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry. So it's funny that bit about my chart. But anyway, yeah. So when you learn, when you go into all kinds of typing systems and systems in general to understand how humanity works and the human condition, for me, there's a temptation to take on this way of thinking and this way of observing things, and then thinking it's the only way to look at things, and it's about that. It's about that. The temptation is to think that this person has figured out how things are, and this is the way things are, and this is truth, and this is and that what happens with those teachers, that they usually they can't help it, because at the moment that you portray things so clearly with a lot of mental clarity, as Ra, or who, the creator of human design, calls it, the moment that you set up a system, you have to, as it asks for an objective, like purpose, to claim a purpose. And what happens is each of these teachers would usually tell you, okay, this is the way things are, and this is where you should move. This is the direction of movement. And each of them will tell you will call it the direction in different names. All those systems that have a strong logical left brain quality to them, they will draw out a path of a kind for you. It might be, some teachers call it enlightenment. The objective is to get enlightened. Some teachers will tell you the objective is to evolve. Some teachers will tell you the objective is to maybe I love this one, but maybe to be more in your anchored self and not your floating self. Like the moment that you draw out structure, yeah, you create a kind of duality, and then it's very tempting to say, okay, I don't want to be this, I don't want to be the lower levels, I don't want to be the painful, disruptive part of this model. I want to be the more beneficial and preferred part. And how do I get from here to there? Okay. And this is actually very, very both satisfying and relaxing to my mental system. And I can't help it. I love this stuff. And sometimes I just find myself sitting down and taking in another system and noticing what's happening for me. And sometimes I'm asking myself, why am I doing this again? Why am I taking in another system? Don't I have enough systems in my mind? didn't I like learn enough? And like I can tell you, if I think about it, yes, absolutely, I've learned enough. But then there's something in me that really likes to see reality and the human condition, especially from different angles, and just hear about it and think about it from different angles and through different systems. And the more that I juxtapose different systems and I think about it from this angle, and then I go to this system and I look at stuff from this side, and the more that I do it, something is maturing in me, and I can't help it. It's just a part of my my process. And then someone with some system may say, like the Christian perception may say, it's your vocation. And I agree. Ever since I've learned about vocation, I understand more that we have certain things that are just part of the way that we are, and our role in reality, in society, in reality. And one of my vocation is this, to be that person that can try on different system without identifying with them too much. And that's that. So what I'm trying to discern is it can be pretty confusing, and also the tendency to take on a perception. Sometimes it's tempting also to take on the direction that this teacher or the system is defining. And what happens, I noticed for myself, is that at times when I took on and took in certain systems, I took on also the objectives of the teacher. But I've learned not to do that anymore. Because why? Because, well, because it doesn't, quite frankly, doesn't feel good eventually. It's hard for me to define what I feel in those cases, but it feels, I find myself eventually, when I try to do that, I find myself like divorced or split off from myself. I try, like, it's like, well, I have a metaphor. I just yesterday I saw on YouTube singing voice development teacher talking about developing your own voice, and she was talking about how each person has their own voice, and we tend to emulate or to try to sing like other singers that we like. I have a past in singing, so I related to what you talked about, and I found it very true. As musical human being, and one with some kind of taste and discernment about what is beautiful and what is not, we tend to want to be like the best singers we hear, right? It's natural. But it's the wrong way to go if you're going to become a singer or just cultivate your singing voice. It can be a trap that you fall into, because it can get really frustrating as you go along and try to be someone else. You can feel divorced somehow from yourself, and you can so first you can get damage to your own voice because you're trying to do something that is not natural to you. And the best way to go is to get inspired, but not to try to be like someone else. And it's exactly the same way with systems and teachers, exactly the same way. It's amazing how perfect this metaphor is. And you have to experience it in some practical thing in your life that you cultivate kind of doing or an ability. But there's the difference between trying to emulate someone else and then learning, getting good training of how to be yourself in this thing. And I think a good teacher or a good spiritual friend or a good teacher at anything, and especially a good therapist, would give you the tools and the support, a good parent as well, to guide you and discover what is your true way of doing stuff, your own path in self-development. And your own path is truly unique. And what she said, this teacher, which was really true and brilliant, was once you discover your own true voice through opening your throat and learning to breathe, and just it emerges out of your body. And accepting that is my true voice and cultivating it, then you can try and emulate all kinds of, like, putting different hues and colors. And I feel it's so true also for the spiritual or self-development path for me, that the moment that I try to put on myself another teacher's objectives about what is the direction of my process, then I start to feel stiff. I start to feel like I'm judging myself a lot of the times. And basically, I start to be less present and more like thinking and trying to, I get like split off. My thinking gets very polarized. I feel like I'm trying to solve paradoxes with my brain, and I'm less present and more thinking. So what happened for me during the years of doing that was that I've learned through quite a lot of struggle to, first of all, to ground my life and process. Like, I understood it's all about practice for me, because you can practice something like a meditation or a technique, and you can justify that practice from different kinds of systems. So what I've seen is different systems lead to the same practice or a very similar practice. This is one thing I've seen. So I've seen that what's important for me, after all, is, yeah, I like to think about stuff. I like to see life from different angles, but but if I want to stay sane, if I want to stay balanced and stable emotionally, mentally, I have to just let go so much of having to figure things out, and letting go also of objectives. and just focus on what am I practicing right now? Because I can practice something and it has multiple reasons and benefits to it. It can like work in different layers of existence. If I think about, let's say, the chakra system and the way that the teaching of law of one looks at the chakra system and the levels of awareness in our being and mind, I can practice meditation of some kind, and it will relate to different levels of being in my system and have benefits for each layer. Because if I meditate, like if I practice mindfulness meditation, it can be good for my survival, my lowest chakra, red ray chakra, because it relaxes my system and it calibrates my nervous system and enables me to heal from health issues that I have. It can be good for my second chakra, which is about self-esteem. If I'm grounded in this moment, if I can let go of problematic emotions, I can slowly ground myself in a self-esteem that is not subjected to outside influence. It can be good to my third chakra, which is about integration into society and our relationships, because if I'm more relaxed and centered, after all, people like can approach me in a different way and feel like experience me in a different way, and I can engage differently in society. And this enables me to relax this certain parents and even like clear away certain ways of experiencing gradually through this process of practice. If I practice meditation, I can get more access to my shadow side, and thus I can cultivate self-compassion in my heart chakra, fourth ray. And if I practice meditation through this access to self-compassion, I can become gradually compassionate to others. If I practice meditation, well, you can see what I mean. It's good for my I can gradually develop clearer expression. I can gradually develop connection to higher self and to the principle of self as consciousness. This is good for all my okay. So all of these chakras, each has a different perception of life. So I've learned that focusing on the practice enables me to let go of deciding whose side am I on, what am I about, what is my objective, because each level of perception in our own being has its own agendas. And I find that I really, really move between different agendas a lot in myself. And then I switch perceptions and I switch the teacher that I tend to listen to. At least this is the way that it was for me for a long time. I would move a lot around. I think today I move less because I'm a bit like stabilizing, but part of this stabilizing is because I focused on the issue of what am I practicing, what is good for me, and how do I know what is good for me? It's good for me. I've noticed that When something is good for me, I don't have to ask if it's good for me, because it's good for me on several levels. And then I don't have to just hold on to this narrow definition of this is good for me because only this, because I want to, like, let's say, connect to my higher self or to intelligent infinity in the words of Law of One. But it's so good for me in all levels that I need, like, help with, or it's so good for a certain thing for a certain period that is really correct for me to deal with at this time of my life, that I even don't have, like, the question is good for me. The moment that I engage with the practice, I know this is the thing for me now, right now. I don't know what will be tomorrow, but I can feel and see the benefits, usually either immediately or in a short while. Sometimes it's a matter of experimenting and seeing, so, because also sometimes I'm confused, but I can feel it and I can see it quite clearly. So I've learned to get less caught up in what's the real story about life and about humanity, and what's the real modality, because there's so many modalities, and concentrate more of which practice am I invited into through this modality, not which objective does this teacher define for me. You should become this. You should go for that. But what am I invited to practice? And is this practice feeling correct for me in my own experience? And sometimes I just try it out because I feel like an intuition. This is something I feel I want to try out. I want to try it out. And then whatever happens, happens. And whatever I'm interested next in and drawn to next is what I'm drawn to. And yeah, another thing I've learned to see is that the question of presence is usually the right question, meaning not only is practice important, but when I practice something, I've learned that whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm engaging with in terms of practice or in terms of knowledge, usually if I feel confused about what is this giving me, why am I engaging in this, how is this influencing me, the question of is this allowing me or helping me or causing me, making me be more present in my life, either in the way of quantity of presence. I mean, the more I'm prompted to get, like, woken up in the middle of my days dream, get more focused, get more present, see what I feel. See, usually it's about, does this make me engage more with what I feel? And I'll mention another thing about connection later on. But presence was something that I used to focus on for a long time. Does this make me more present? Does this make me more aware inside, more aware outside? Because if a certain system or teacher is just making me just think more and bang my head against some mental wall and trying to figure out who's right and how it's right, and if this is what's happening, I usually, by now, I've learned to like let go of it a bit and come back to whatever makes me more present. For the reason I already mentioned before, because presence is where it's at for me. Presence is where change is, where transformation is. And basically, I think the urge, the deep impulse that's moving me through all this kind of exploration, self-exploration, is the deep need to change, the deep insight, deep, even unconscious longing to be an agent of change for myself, not for anyone else in my own life. The understanding that something needs to change, that something is not quite what it should be. And the more that I get present, the more change manifests. And this is my own experience. I'm going to take off my sweater because I'm like very warm, and be back. Okay, so so we had, what do we have here? We have looking at things more like all along a process of self-realization, self-exploration, or whatever you would like to call it. Looking at the practice itself. What do I feel like I'm practicing? Even if you think you're not practicing anything, we are always practicing, and this is the thing that we are always practicing. From the moment we get up in the morning to the moment we go to bed, we're practicing something, okay? And if we want to change our life and ourselves, we have to change our ways. We have to, there's no other way. Either from grace, just being changed, life changes you sometimes and enables you to see something new and to just be different, or through the grind of taking on some practice and trying to do things differently. We change through different action or inaction, but we have to change our ways, and then we change. That's the usual way to to go. And so to those of us that, like me, are open, very open-minded, and take in a lot of teachings, for me, the solution to that, and not going crazy by that, was to focus on what do I practice? What am I invited today, this morning, this week, this from this teacher? What am I actually invited to practice? This is the bottom line for me. This has become the bottom line. And in that, I noticed that the bottom line of the bottom line, I'm sorry, is how does this practice make me, does this practice make me more present? And it doesn't have to be rigid observing. It's just a kind of a pointer that can be helpful to stabilize, because sometimes people get lost. People get lost in perspectives. People tend to our adverse parts of our personality play into identifying with certain systems and parts of system, and accentuating parts of system that we learn. So sometimes we use system that we engage with to start to judge ourselves, deprecate ourselves, or sometimes we use them to judge other people. Have you done that? I did. And yeah, this happens. And for this not to last too long, I think the question of, is this making me more present? You know, am I more here? Like whatever here is, and here has a lot of, here is the most multidimensional thing that you can find, you know? Sometimes when we hear just like Eckhart Tolle, the power of now, you know? So now sounds like an object in that sentence. Just the invitation to be here now, be present. Like it sounds very like one-dimensional, you know? It's a thing. It's not a thing, you know? Now is the most multidimensional thing you would ever find, because it's the most, like, it's the greatest and most profound portal you can find to anything and everything. So being in here now, being present, is like it's so profound, it's so multidimensional, it has so many aspects. And so the question is, it's making me more present? No, there's things that are not being present, and you can start to feel it, you start to discern it. And the way to discern it is to ask this question along the years when we engage with different teachers. And even when you start a relationship, you know, for me, even relationship, and this is leading to the last point that I want to bring in about connection, because even if for me, creating relationship has been tricky in my life, and I had to do a lot of discernment about relationships, being in them, not being in them, how to choose, and I had a lot of confusion around that. And this question is also useful in relationships. When you start a relationship, or when you experience a bit of conflict. And when you ask yourself, is this relationship good for me? So the question of, is this making me more or less present? And how can I also, to avoid like breaking off relationships too easily, you can also ask, not only is this making me more present, but how can I use whatever conflict there is to get more present? First and foremost, get more present, feel into my feelings, ground in presence, in self-awareness, and then deal with whatever's going on. First, relax into this moment. It's a good question. It's a good observation to make. How can I use this diversity or conflict that is arising to get more present? And for me, a lot of the time, it meant just not being in relationship, because I tend to be so I tend to be quite overwhelmed going into a relationship because of certain patterns that I have, and I just lose my focus and my presence. And for me, much of the time, I had to choose not to be in a relationship because I saw it was playing into certain patterns and certain dynamics which will just bring me out of a very present and focused place in my life. So the question of, is this making me less or more present in my life, was a kind of discerning question that helped me to know, is this the time to engage in a relationship right now, in this relationship or relationship? Okay. So now I want to go to a less, a more wait, less a more hazy area, that I feel really I have to find my way around to express what I feel and think about this, and it's about connection. So lately I've been, and again, it's about synthesizing things and understanding the way that all kinds of influences in my life meet and synthesize into a coherent, a kind of coherence. I had the fortune to find the practice of a certain branch of practice which is about what would be better called as relatefulness. And this has different names nowadays. There's a practice called authentic relating, and there's a practice called circling, which lately is also given the name relatefulness practice. And it's about well, look it up if you want, but generally it's about practicing a kind of relating one-on-one or in a group that is very presence-oriented and is very oriented to include the embodied experience, the somatic experience, and include more of the now and things that you can access in the now while relating. And this is a very transparent, quite vulnerable at times way of relating, and you can practice it because there are groups that have been practicing it for quite a few years, and I was just taking into it a couple of years ago, and happy that it came my way because it's changing me and it's changing my life. And there's something about that I realize, and I'm realizing it's on the verge of my awareness about how you can really utilize connecting and relating to bring about a lot of things, most of all, presence and healing. There's also the work of Stephen Forges and polyvagal theory that explains much of the aspects of this potential of relating, because what he explains is that when we relate to another person, we regulate each other, and we do it through our voice and our face and our expression and our body language, and our nervous system can rest in a very profound way that we find it hard to achieve alone. We can rest with another other that is also regulated and relaxed and calibrated, that we have this influence on one another, and basically that relating is a great tool for healing the nervous system, for recalibrating certain patterns that we have, emotional patterns, social patterns. It's quite the powerful tool, and it's a tool that is inbuilt in us as a human being. And if you study it and you start looking into it and experiencing those practices, I challenge you to ignore this part of your being, this part that is quite simply that needs or benefits, that needs others or benefits from others. It's an enormous inbuilt given conditioning that we have as human beings of being social and being interdependent and being just influenced from one another. And we can use this is a very powerful tool to use for change, personal change and social change, because if we can use this the way that it is used in those practices of that I just mentioned, it has such potential. And I'm trying to see where is the where does this insight, this understanding about the power of connection, the power of relating, where does it meet? Where does it cross path? Where does it becomes a synthesis with everything that I'm taking in and learning about the human condition and myself and my own situation. And it's hard to explain, but I feel that eventually a lot is a lot is contained in the term of connection. A lot of the systems that I'm taking in can be thought of and seen through the prism of reconnecting everything to everything, because everything that I take in or I'm inspired by I've learned lately can be said to have something to do with perennial philosophy. And perennial philosophy is actually a word coined in the 20th century, I think, or in the 19th century, maybe, that pertains to everything that has to do with the perception of oneness, that everything is eventually one. And although everything is one, the problem is that there is the perception or the illusion that I am separate. And with that comes all the discourse we can see in ourselves and in our world. If I am separate from existence, from God, from the source, I have the freedom to feel lonely, to feel afraid, to think I'm not worthy in any way, to have problem with myself, to feel insufficient, to feel insecure. I'm sorry. Oops, sorry. So if I'm separate, everything becomes possible, and the whole shadow sides of humanity becomes possible. And then arises the actual need for healing from the world of wholeness. So not only is it about presence, like not only the focus of self-development can be about cultivating more presence in its myriad aspects, but one of the things arising from presence, and maybe one of its aspects, and maybe one of its names, like I'm tempted to say one of the names of presence is connection. And one of the names of connection is presence. You know, it's like they live within one another. And I know I kind of don't have the right word for it, but I'm just describing an experience that connection is becoming for me, I think, as much as a multidimensional word as presence. And also when I say connection, sometime in the past, when I said connection, it was a daunting word for me. It had painful undertones. It meant relationship, and relationships were tricky and difficult for me. But today, when I say connecting or connection, it became more of a, it's like I feel different in my body when I say it, because it became of different meaning. It became a grounding word. It became, I understood that through relating in this moment, I can access so much of my aliveness, and potential for healing, potential for a lot of aliveness, and it has also this multidimensional meaning. Like connection can be from me to you, like it can be connection to my parts, like when I drop down into my belly where all my shadow parts are. This is connection. And connection is also when I connect to my higher aspects. So connection became, it's kind of, I think it's even like kind of, when I think about it, in the Christian Trinity, you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So I think even connection could be the Holy Spirit. Like it's the thing that connects. You know, if the Father is the higher aspects of consciousness, like the infinite intelligence, let's say, and the Son is the embodied experience, like body, mind, spirit, like body, mind complex. The spirit is like the aspect that is more is both sacred, but it's not static. You know, that spirit, it's sacred, but it always like it does something to us. It's kind of mischievous, and I feel that the aspect of connection, and it kind of has that quality, this quality of when you connect, when you like see things from the aspect of connecting, things start to move around, you know, they don't stay the same. And you know, there's always like presence, you know, you can always answer a problem with more presence. No, I'm afraid and this and that will happen. Well, why don't you be present to your fear, you know? Or I don't know what to do. I feel confused. Is this teacher right or this teacher? why don't you be present with your confusion? How does it feel? Okay, so the focal point, good word, the focal point of presence is always, or usually, I don't like saying always, but usually, a very good tool to switch the dimension, to get out of dead end, you know, and like go to a wider perspective, switch dimension. So the same thing I feel about connection. Connection for me is not anymore about, am I good enough? Will I be received? Is this a relationship, or am I alone? Like it's gradually stopping being about that for me, and it's starting to be like a keyword, like presence. And I think we can see, I'm going to illustrate like I did with presence, and I'm going to say the last thing, because I've been on for only, I think, an hour now. But what I mean is, like the same thing. Like when I'm with someone and I'm afraid that you don't like me right now, or I'm afraid to say something to you. So connection has become multidimensional in a way that there are no dead ends in connecting, in connecting truly, because even telling you I'm afraid of saying something to you, it's connecting, because I'm revealing something, I'm bringing something to the mutual space between us. So if once I thought that if I'm afraid to say something to you, I'm disengaging and it's not connection, then today I understand that if I tell you that I don't want to say something and I'm stopping myself from saying something, this is a way to connect. Another example is like switching the direction or the level of connection. Like if I'm afraid that I'm losing someone, yeah, so I'm afraid of losing connection, but I can connect to the fear. I can be the someone for the fear. I can like manufacture connection in the fear of losing connection. So connection has become like this magical, mischievous word that just I can find it anywhere. I can use it for anything, and I can always get connected somehow. There's no lack of connection anymore. And the way that presence is always there, it's always available, and it's usually useful if you just know how to find the way to use it. So the last thing I want to say, that everything that I've been learning and taking in, influences and systems and ways of thinking, if I watch and perceive them as ways of cultivating and allowing for more ways of connection, then I don't have to decide who's right. I just have to watch this this system or idea that I'm taking in, and then ask myself, how does this enable me to be more connected, and on what level? which kind of connection is this inviting me into? And then I don't have to decide who's right, who's the best speaker, and who figured out humanity and life and the spiritual process the most. And I can just take in stuff. And also another way is, while taking in the stuff, I can observe the experience of connection that I feel while doing it, because when I take a teacher in, there's all kinds of things that happen that are not verbal. And if I refrain or I stop focusing on, is this person absolutely right? Well, he's not. He's not, because even God is not absolutely right. And God doesn't think in the way that we do in dichotomies anyway. Okay? So any teacher is not right, absolutely. But then so much connection is happening when I connection to myself, and he describes certain aspects of my being, and when he describes it, I feel it, and I realize it more like succinctly, and I can, and everything is happening, and in this happening there is connection. So in a way, mentally, like focusing on those portals or keys of connection or presence in our process, for me, and maybe also for you, it allows us to quote quantum physics, it allows us to kind of stay as a wave and refrain from crashing into being a particle too much. You can be a wave and once in a while take on a certain structure and be a particle, haha, but you don't have to live there, because if it's more about connection, then you don't have to decide. You don't have, even try it out. The next time that you really sit, really present, and you have a relaxed time with a lover or a friend or a family member that you feel safe with, try to focus, try to think, okay, this is about the connection. This is not about who's right, who's wrong, who I am and who they are. The definition. Am I a good person? Is he a good person? Is he stubborn? Am I too sensitive? And just stay with this dimension of connecting. See how it feels. It might overwhelm you at the beginning with all kinds of sensations, because it's a very sensitive and a vulnerable place, kind of vulnerable place to be in. I would say very vulnerable, but it's alive. Try it out, see what happens. Sorry for the phone call before, and see you later.